You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, biohacking, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere and anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your host, Dr. Justin Marchegiani, as he answers your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio. Feel free and head over to beyondwellnessradio.com where you can access our full podcast transcriptions. While you're there, you can also sign up for our thyroid and female hormone video series. This series goes into the root cause of why your hormones are out of balance. While you're there, you can also schedule a functional medicine consult with Dr. Justin, myself, where we'll dig deeper into the root cause of your health challenges. Feel free and think of sharing this podcast with at least one person. This podcast grows by people sharing it. Sharing is caring. If you can think of one person that can benefit from this information, please feel free and share it. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe on iTunes. You can also click below the video or podcast where you'll see the iTunes review button and leave us a review. You can also sign up for the newsletter at beyondwellnessradio.com where you'll get updates before anyone else. Thank you so much and enjoy the show. Evan, it's Dr. J. How are we doing today, man?
Happy Monday. I'm doing good.
Happy Monday. It's a great day out here in Austin, Texas, enjoying the wonderful weekend, ready to get back to work and get back in the grind. How you doing?
Too. If I'm off for too long, I start to feel like I'm losing my purpose. It's like, man, I need to get back to the hustle here.
I know. I got another hour planned after this podcast. I'm going to be crushing out some YouTube videos. So really excited for that. There's a couple we talked about last week that I didn't get a chance to do. We're going to hit those up. And today's going to be a great little podcast on amino acids, which is such a great topic. And we're going to keep the podcast more focused on the mood and energy component of amino acids today. So I'm really excited to hit that topic up.
Yes, amino acids have changed my life for the better, without a doubt, for sure. I first came across probably tryptophan was probably the first amino acid that I discovered and got into. You know, I was dealing with depression in college, and of course, conventional medicine or conventional psychiatry, they're just going to put people on antidepressant drugs. We could look up some statistics if we wanted to, but I guarantee everyone listening has a friend or relative that's taking some type of medication like a Prozac, and it could work, and maybe it's necessary in some cases, but as we always discuss, it's not getting to the root cause. And so this antidepressant, you know, it's not benign. Definitely.
100%. I'm actually going to be taking some amino acids here right now as we go. Huge fan of amino acids. The more stressed you are, the more you burn through your amino acids. All right. Very important. Now, we run a lot of organic acid testing in our practice. And one of the things we look at is we look at the metabolites of neurotransmitters. We'll look at things like 5-hydroxyindoloacetate. That gives us a window into serotonin. We'll look at things like homovanillate. Right? That gives us a window into dopamine levels, right? So really, really important compounds that give us a window into how our body is utilizing dopamine, utilizing adrenaline. Vanillmandelate, another one that we look at for adrenaline. Right. So these are really important. Adrenaline's obviously energy and regulating our fight or flight response. Dopamine's going to be our I love you neurotransmitter. Also helps with focus and ADD. Serotonin's going to be really important. It's going to help with mood. It's going to also help with sleep because serotonin's an important precursor to melatonin, which is a sleep hormone. So these amino acids have profound effects on our mood, on our energy, on our focus. And a lot of people actually reach to illicit drugs, cocaine, meth, even marijuana, things that aren't as bad, to actually artificially boost some of these compounds. Even sugar. Sugar is probably one of the worst known offenders because sugar actually increases dopamine.
How about
Lots
caffeine?
of studies on this where people, go into these MRIs and such, and they look at what parts of the brain light up when these drugs are in the body, and they find that sugar increases the same dopamine receptors that heroin does. There's a famous rat study where they feed these rats Oreo cookies, and they find the same receptors of the brain, same parts of the brain light up for the Oreo cookies compared to, I think, the cocaine. I think it was even worse. The Oreo cookies caused that part of the brain to light up even more than the drugs did.
It did, which is crazy. And sugar, I would say, is probably the number one most abused drug in the US for sure, but probably most of the developed world. Something that's interesting, what you kind of hit on already, is most people, we're always modifying our neurotransmitters, so our brain chemicals. So this is your dopamine, this is your GABA, this is your serotonin, your adrenaline, your noradrenaline. A lot of us modify our neurotransmitters by ourselves, like we're trying to self-treat, even though we're not realizing what we're doing by eating sugar, or we're using social media.
Yeah.
Excessive Facebook or other type of social medias, alcohol, caffeine, drugs.
Yeah.
We're trying to modify our brain chemistry all the time, and we just don't realize what we're doing. So some of the symptoms, like if you've got low catecholamines, I'll read these off here.
Yeah.
You've got depression, you've got apathy, you've got easily bored, a lack of energy or focus, a lack of drive, low motivation, ADD, like you mentioned, attention deficit, procrastination, and indecisiveness. That's a big one. And then craving carbs, alcohol, caffeine, or drugs for energy. So that's the catecholamines. And if you have enough of those, you should be energized, you should be upbeat, you should be focused, you should have the ability to get stuff done. You know what comes to mind? I think of all the children that you and I have heard about with especially our female clients, our moms. Yeah. We always hear about their children and how they're hooked on video games all the time. To me, it sounds like video games are burning out the catecholamines and causing these kids to not be able to do anything else, like get a job, or not want to get a job because they'd rather play games.
Yeah, I mean, that's one component, right? So if we look at the neurotransmitters, there's two sides we're going to hit it on, right? There's the burning up side. What are the stressors that are causing you to burn them up? And then number two, what are things that we can do to actually replete and help support and heal? Because right now, I think some research out there, over 20% of fifth graders are on some kind of antidepressant, some kind of SSRI or SSNRI. These are basically drugs that modulate the amount of neurotransmitters that are in the brain, and it does it by blocking these reuptake ports. So how that works is, here's your presynaptic neuron, here's your postsynaptic neuron. Okay, in between is what's called the synaptic cleft. This is where a lot of the neurochemicals, the serotonin, the dopamine, they all live right here. And basically, these chemicals get reabsorbed back into the presynaptic neuron over time. And basically, the drugs block that reuptake port, so these neurotransmitters don't go back. They hang in this space. They hang in this synaptic cleft area longer. So then you start getting more of them in that area. Now, that can change the mood. It can change a lot of different things. The problem is, the longer those neurochemicals hang outside of that outside of that presynaptic neuron, so the more these neurotransmitters stay here and don't go back up to that presynaptic neuron, the faster they get recycled. So that tends to be one of the reasons why, if you're on one of these medications long term, the dose tends to have to go up, unless you're making other changes that we'll talk about in a bit. So that just kind of gives you some of the mechanism of how these things work. That's one potential mechanism of how these medications work.
Yeah, so let's chat about, like you mentioned, the first section, what causes a deficiency of amino acids. So you hit on stress. You said that we're going to burn up amino acids when we're stressed. Same thing with vitamin C too. A lot of times you and I will see that vitamin C is very low. We'll see that neurotransmitters are low. We could see all the amino acid metabolites are low. Across the board, stress, eating while stressed, being in a fight or flight mode, not chewing your food, low stomach acid levels. We could hit on the infection piece. If someone's eating a good diet, let's say they're listening and they're eating a primal paleo whole foods diet, but if they've got parasites or bacterial bugs or yeast, which is something you and I deal with all the time, you're getting your nutrients stolen. And so it's not really people say, oh, you are what you eat, but really it's you are what you digest. And if you've got bugs stealing your nutrients, then you're going to be at a deficient state.
100%. So we kind of go back, right? What are the underlying stressors that drive a lot of these things? When we say stress, people tend to associate stress as emotional stress, which is fine. So emotional stress is going to be family issues, finance issues. It could be relationship issues, problems with your kids, death of a loved one. Though any of those things can be, a big, I should say, a hole in that emotional pipe here, where a lot of those nutrients and a lot of those neurochemicals will flow down the more stressed you are. It's going to increase the burning rate. Just like driving your car faster and harder on the highway is going to go through more gas. You'll also go through more neurotransmitters with those stressors. So keep that in the back of your mind. So some people don't have the ability to change that. They may be in the middle of a stressful situation where it has to kind of play out, right? So we have to at least work on the backside of it. What's the backside? Well, you can at least make sure your diet's really good, right? What does that mean? A paleo template's always a great place to start. Healthy servings of animal protein in every meal, lots of vegetables, more green vegetables than starch and fruit. And if you're going to do starch, try to keep it to, dialed into the amount that you can handle based on exercise, and keep the fruit on the lower sugar side. And it's all based upon your level of activity and kind of your body fat and your exercise levels, right? More active you are, you could probably handle more carbs. The more muscle you have, the more carbs. The less muscle and the less active you have, probably the less carbs. So you can kind of keep that dialed in. So stress side, we may not be able to change it. So we have to really make sure that the food side is dialed in. That's number one. Number two, we have to make sure the sleep side's dialed in. Between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. is where a lot of the neurotransmitters get restored and recycled. So getting to bed, ideally closer to 10 to 11, will allow adequate restoration of those neurotransmitters when it comes to sleep. And then number three is not excessively exercising. People will use excessive exercise like CrossFit to really up the dopamine or serotonin or adrenaline artificially by creating a stress response. And nothing wrong with that. The problem is if we're catabolic and we're breaking down, we may not be able to recover the next day from that stress response. So that will create more fatigue and more adrenal and more hormonal issues down the road.
Good. So yeah, we would say 24, 48 hours before you hit the gym again. So if you do a hard workout, you might not need to go 5-6 days a week. We've seen people that they have too much of a good thing. Now, a lot of people, they're at the bottom end of the spectrum. They're not getting enough exercise. They're not getting enough movement, stimulation, light exposure, walking. They're not doing any of it. But then you've got these other crazy athletes on the opposite end where they're doing 5-6 days a week and they're starting to lose muscle mass. So yes, you definitely can't have too much of a good thing with exercise. Give yourself 24, 48 hours. Do you need protein powders? Do you need amino acids? They could help. I don't know if I would consider them foundational. Like that means you could still get results without them. But if you're somebody who you're at an underweight situation, you're concerned you're getting too thin, that's definitely where Jester and I are going to look at giving you like a hydrolyzed collagen or a beef protein or a grass-fed whey or organic pea protein, and you can supplement with those. But you've still got to focus on the food too. We've talked with people who they'll do a protein shake instead of a meal, which is fine in a pinch. But if you're skipping meals, like your after workout meal is just a protein shake as opposed to you sitting down and having an actual post-workout meal, we'd much prefer real food over powders when possible.
Absolutely. And I think combining the amino acid supplements with the real food's the best way to go. What you get with the amino acids is you get amino acids in your bloodstream very, very fast, very easily. The thermic effect of food is basically how much energy your body depletes itself of by metabolizing the protein and digesting it. So about 30 to 40% of the energy you get from the protein goes into actually breaking it down and metabolizing it. That's important. So, close to over a third to half of all that energy goes into just breaking itself down. So that's not the best. If you're trying to get those nutrients in fast and easy and not put a lot of stress on your system, a good amino acid supplement, it does help with that. So it gets the amino acids in there fast. It's in the bloodstream so the body can utilize it for energy and nutrition right away. But number two, it doesn't put a lot of stress on your digestive system. So you don't have to think, 2 or 3 hours ahead of time, what should I eat? You can kind of just, let's say, wake up and you can have a nice little shake and get the amino acids in there. And then you can also use it to replete itself post-workout. Good studies. I know on whey protein, there's studies 20 to 30 minutes post-workout, doing 20 to 30 grams of protein can increase growth hormone post-workout. And that's with whey protein. And I imagine that's going to be similar with other amino acid profiles. You could probably find something similar with collagen and probably even similar with pea protein as well.
Yep. Look, can you chat about vegetarians and vegans for a bit? Because we've seen that some vegans that come to us, they could have more issues with mood issues, anxiety, depression, irritability, rage, IBS issues. See that a lot more in vegans versus people that are eating animal proteins.
Well, again, a lot of vegans and vegetarians, you can do it right, but it takes planning. All right. So number one, like, where do you get your proteins when you're a vegan vegetarian? Now, again, there'll be some proteins in plants, but not a lot. I mean, if you look at the amount of protein in plants, there's not a lot. And plus, there aren't a lot of calories in plants. So there's good micronutrients, right? No one's saying like a bunch of kale doesn't have, a whole bunch of micronutrients in it, right? Vitamins, minerals, those kind of things, potassium, those things. But if you look at the macronutrients, right? Obviously, they're going to be non-starchy carbohydrates, but there's not a lot of calories. I mean, if you look at, we can just go to chronometer.com. We can plug in calories in a cup of kale. I'll do it right now.
I'm going to guess it's like 20 to 40 calories.
You're probably going to find maybe 20 grams of 20 calories in there, maybe, and then maybe 1 gram of protein. Yeah, so 1 cup of kale is 33 calories. All right. Now there's 2.9
is what you're saying.
Yeah, and there's 2.9 grams of protein. So, what's a good serving of kale per meal? Let's say someone really goes out and does 2 cups. That's a lot of kale per meal. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah, you just got 5 grams of protein. That's inadequate, and you got 60 calories. Like, just not enough. Right? So again, vegetarians have to get their protein by combining either, rice and legumes, because a lot of vegetarian proteins are insufficient in methionine and lysine. So they have to work on this food combining thing, or they supplement amino acids. The ones that you see that are like, hey, look at this guy. He's a vegan vegetarian bodybuilder. He's this. Yeah, of course. He's using a whole bunch of rice protein and pea protein. Like, that's the only way you can really do it and get the right amount of protein requirements without all the carbs. There's been studies out there. People have looked at, creating a meal plan for vegetarians, vegans, and you got to get 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrates minimum to get that adequate amount of protein. An adequate amount, let's say half your body weight in grams. So I'm 210 pounds. For me to get 110 grams of protein, I'd have to do rice and beans or just lentils, and I'd have to really pound the lentils up. And lentils are 2/3 carbohydrate starch to 1/3 protein. So do the math. I'm at 100 grams of protein, and then I'm already at 300 plus grams of carbohydrate. So, and then you also have the digestive component where you may be using a whole bunch of BINO or enzymes because you may not have the ability to break down a lot of those beans because of the phytates and the lectins, some of the gut irritating compounds.
Right. So then you run into that issue. Now you're running around, you're gassy because you're trying to eat enough beans and other types of veggies to get the protein. But it'd be much easier if you just look at some good quality. And you don't have to go crazy. Like you said, even just a palm-sized portion of animal protein's plenty. We're not saying overeat protein because you've got the mTOR pathway, which is definitely going to shorten lifespan. You don't really want to overactivate mTOR, but it's a switch. You want to throttle it up and throttle it down. And so there's going to be days where on workout days, you are going to do some good animal proteins. Maybe you go a bit lighter on the protein on days where you're not working out.
Exactly. So the benefit you get from animal protein, and again, we'll put a little kind of qualifying thing in here. Of course, when we talk about animal proteins, we're talking about grass-fed, pasture-fed, hormone-free, antibiotic-free, organic, right? Animals fed, appropriate feed. We're kind of encompassing all that in there. A lot of vegetarians and vegans don't ever put that statement regarding on their vegetables. Like when they talk about like a carrot, for instance, right? An organic carrot isn't the same thing as a carrot that may be genetically modified and sprayed pounds and pounds of herbicides, rodenticides, fungicides, genetically modified pesticides on there, right? So again, a carrot on this side that I just depicted full of all those toxins isn't the same as a organic carrot, for instance. Same thing with the meat. So we can qualify the plants. A lot of vegans and vegetarians don't do that, right? You see What the Health, that movie on Netflix. We'll have to do a review of that soon, right? It's kind of like, here are your plants, and we don't really have to qualify the plants as much, but we'll throw all the meat over here as being in this really, really bad thing full of chemicals, where there are ways you can get healthy sources of meat, which we support here on the show. So again, the benefits of the meat. Why is it so great? You don't have to get a whole bunch of carbohydrate. That's nice because a lot of people are insulin resistant. Their metabolism may not be able to handle that kind of carbohydrate. Some may not. The vegans and vegetarians that you hear that do so well, the reason why they do so well is they have good carbohydrate handling mechanisms. They can get that 300 to 400 grams and they can do okay. That's the problem. But the issue is you have a lot of people that are insulin resistant. I'd go as far to say as 3/4 of the population are. And that's why you have so many people that don't do well with that kind of diet.
Yep. Well said. So we hit the diet piece. That's important. We had to spend time there because it's so underappreciated, the role of amino acids just from your good quality proteins. Let's talk about supplements a bit. So you said you were going to take some. What are you taking amino acid wise?
Yeah, so you have amino acids for performance, right? From maybe cognitive performance. These are going to be things like serotonin precursors and dopamine and adrenaline precursors. So our serotonin precursors are going to be 5-HTP. All right. You can also go upstream one and do tryptophan. Tryptophan has to go through this kind of governor enzyme here that has an effect on how that gets converted downstream. I think it's 5-hydroxylase is the enzyme, and that enzyme has a governor to it. So it's kind of like someone puts a governor on your car where you can only go 65 on the highway. You can't go any higher, no matter how deep that gas pedal is. Same thing. So we like to do 5-HTP because we can bypass that governor. And we always want to give it with B6 because B6 and B vitamins are, one, they get depleted with stress. And number two, they get depleted with excess carbohydrate. So by getting extra good B vitamins in there, that's essential. So B6, right? Pyridoxal 5-phosphate, B9, which is going to be folate, not folic acid, but folate or calcium folinate. We have B12, of course, ideally, methyl hydroxyl or adenylyl cobalamin. Of course, we have B1, which is going to be your thiamine, B2, which is your riboflavin, B3, which is your niacin. I think B7 is, I think that's biotin, right? So you have all these really good B vitamins that will get depleted with stress. The big ones for neurotransmitters, though, are going to be B6, folate, which is technically B9, and then we have B12, which is your methylated B12. So those are really, really important for the neurotransmitters. We want to make sure that those are dialed in with it. Now, what I just took was my Brain Replete. So it has a combo of 5-HTP and L-tyrosine or dopamine precursors with the extra B vitamin. So I do that. And that's specific for me because my organic acid test tends to show the 5-hydroxyindoloacetate, the vanilmandulate, and the homovanillate a little bit off kilter. And that's just probably because of stress. So I just really support that to make sure I have those building blocks. And of course, my diet's rock solid. But for me, I notice a cognitive benefit, a performance benefit. So I continue to take those as long as my tests continue to show I need it. I continue to take those for me.
Yep, good. And we see that a lot. I mean, whether it's athletes or from a physical perspective burning through aminos, or whether it's engineers or people like you that are just, your brain is just go, 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 go all day. You're burning through those. So that's good. Let me just give a brief list here of some low serotonin symptoms. I hit on the low dopamine symptoms a bit, but serotonin would be anxiety, panic attacks or phobias, worry or being fearful, obsessive thoughts or behaviors, perfectionism, irritability, anxiety that could be worse in the winter. You've got winter blues, sometimes PMS with women, depression, and then at the extreme would be like suicidal thoughts with serotonin. So some people, they may not have all of these. They may just have a couple, like sometimes digestive issues. So IBS, there's a couple different irritable bowel syndrome formulas that Justin and I use, and the 5-HTP actually helps to regulate the intestinal motility. So if you've got diarrhea, the 5-HTP itself could help replenish serotonin, therefore fixing your gut. So digestive issues, you got to look at amino acids too sometimes. Sometimes just the diet doesn't fix it. Sleep issues as well, and then cravings. So any type of alcohol, sugar cravings, that could all be, those are all symptoms I've read off here of serotonin. And there's
a big overlap too. Like if you look at serotonin, right, you're going to see anxiety and potentially panic attacks there, but you'll also see that with GABA as well.
That's true. Right? Well, when you say GABA and serotonin, you would say most of the time GABA and serotonin are going to be messed up together. So you're probably going to supplement those together.
Exactly. The big thing is I very rarely supplement amino acids by themselves. So if we do it short term, like I will maybe do that with sleep, and we'll do 5-HTP at or around dinner and before bed to help kind of improve melatonin synthesis. But in general, if you're doing amino acids long term, you want to have them together, at least some level together, because the amino acid enzyme that gets increased when you take amino acids is the aromatic decarboxylase enzyme, which metabolizes these amino acids. And these enzymes metabolize, relatively speaking, the dopamine, the serotonin, the adrenaline enzymes together. So if you're taking a whole bunch of serotonin precursors like 5-HTP, that enzyme's more active. If that enzyme's more active, guess what it's going to do to the dopamine and adrenaline amino acids? It's going to metabolize it. But if there's less coming in, because you're not supplementing it, you can create deficiencies longer term. And of course, it's going to be amino acid dependent, right? The more amino acids you give, the more that enzyme will be active. That's why if we're giving a whole bunch of tyrosine long term, it's good to give at least a little bit of serotonin precursors. So I take one called Dopa Replete Plus that has Mucuna in it, which is actually pure L-Dopa based on my levels. And when you support dopamine, you're actually supporting adrenaline as well. And we put a little bit of N-acetyltyrosine. So you have tyrosine in there. Tyrosine goes downstream to dopamine, which is good. It also can go to adrenaline as well. So we support both the adrenaline pathways too, because typically it goes phenylalanine, tyrosine, L-Dopa, and then from L-Dopa, it can go to dopamine, and then it can go down to norepinephrine. So that's why the more stressed you are, you'll pull from dopamine to your norepinephrine, epinephrine. And part of what happens in that metabolism from dopamine to norepinephrine, you'll actually deplete a lot of sulfur amino acids. So when you're going from dopamine to your catecholamines, you need a lot of sulfur. So that's why it's good to take methionine, cysteine, a lot of your glutathione precursors, glutamine, taurine, right? These are really important because they really help with that dopamine to adrenaline pathway. So longer term, we really want to make sure sulfur amino acids are there to help with that conversion.
Perfect. Well said. Like you mentioned, you're rarely using them by themselves. There's practitioners out there, that's all they do is amino acid therapy. They just look at symptoms. They look at charts. Okay, you have this symptom. I'm going to guess and check. You hit on organic acids testing. So that's something we're definitely going to look at, is figuring out what the levels are on a piece of paper. That way we can track them. Could you look at symptoms and just try to guess and check and self-treat yourself? You definitely could, but I would give the disclaimer that amino acids can be as powerful, if not more powerful, than pharmaceutical drugs. So just because it's something you could go buy at the health food store, like amino acids, or on Amazon, that doesn't mean that it's any less impactful. It doesn't mean it cannot affect you. It certainly can change things very, very quickly. And I've heard of people, you and I have both got videos on this on YouTube as well. And I've heard of people saying, hey, look, I tried this and that, and then I had anxiety, or I tried this and that, and I couldn't sleep. So that's why it's definitely helpful to work with a practitioner who's worked on this, and definitely someone like us who can test you. Because if you just go and you look at a symptom list and you guess, I think it's this, but I don't know, and then you start taking a bunch of tyrosine, the last thing you want to do is have an anxiety or panic attack, and then you've got 3 or 4 or 5, 6 hours where you've got to wait for that supplement to wear off. That's not fun to do.
Yeah, and a lot of these compounds like serotonin and dopamine, that doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. What will cross is the precursors. So giving a lot of the precursor nutrients is essential, and then it will cross the blood-brain barrier and convert in the brain. So that's one component that's really important. I think the most underrated supplement for dealing with mood and amino acids is going to be your hydrochloric acid and your enzymes. Because if we can't metabolize that healthy protein, right? Let's start with that palm size of protein, 3 to 4 ounces. That's going to be about 25 to 30 grams of protein. That's if you can't break that down, right? Protein is the pearl necklaces, the amino acids are the individual pearls. So think of ripping that necklace apart. That's the digestive process that happens. So if we can't make that process happen, we're not going to be able to process those individual pearls in that necklace. So I'd say the digestive component is really important in that. And I think a lot of people that have mood issues too, I know our friend there, A Mind of Her Own, she wrote the book A Mind of Your Own, Dr. Kelly. She talks about the inflammation component when it comes to mood. So she kind of doesn't put as much on the amino acids, she does, but she puts it more on the gut and the inflammation with the brain component. So that's part of why the diet is so important, because that's probably one of the biggest vectors to inflammation outside of having infections in your gut tract along with leaky gut.
Yep, well said. So we can spot treat amino acids for sure, but I like how you always go back to the gut. So definitely Hippocrates and you are aligned. All disease starts in the gut. So when we're talking about brain issues,
life and death starts in the colon.
Yeah, that too. So got to go to the gut. Make sure you're free and clear of infection. So once again, we hit on this every single week probably, but you got to circle back. Make sure you're free of infections, no yeast, no parasites, no fungus, no bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine. That's going to inflame the gut. You're going to see calprotectin go up on your stool test. You're inflamed. You're not digesting well. You're stressed. Maybe you're not chewing. Maybe you're rushing. Maybe you're scrolling on Instagram while you should be just eating your meal in peace. These are all habits that really build up. So always go back to the gut. And yeah, you can spot treat with these, but we always like to go back to root cause. So if you go to a practitioner that just does amino acids and that's all they do is mix and match, I think your results are going to be limited.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of side effects with these antidepressants too. It was Dr. Kelly Brogan. She was on the Joe Rogan show last month too. She did a really nice thing about, talking about antidepressants. And again, it's kind of people use them quite frequently as a coping mechanism, and they really don't want to get to the root cause. I mean, they just think, oh, there's a chemical imbalance in my brain. That's why I need this. But why? Why is there a chemical imbalance? Is it because your diet's crap? Is it because you sleep 5 hours a night? Is it because you can't digest protein? Is it because you're on a low-fat diet? Why? Because the antidepressant's not getting to the root cause. Now, antidepressants may be great in the short run if someone just had a travesty happen in their life and they're trying to get stabilized because they may kill themselves, or their life's absolutely in turmoil, just to kind of get stable. And then once they're stable, they can then reach out and grab the right things and incorporate the right approaches to heal. Short run, it's great. The problem is lots of research has shown that these things are not great in the long run. They have a lot of side effects: nausea, increased appetite, loss of sexual, basically low libido, right? Low sex drive, fatigue, insomnia, dry mouth, blurred vision, constipation, weight gain. So there's a lot of side effects that happen from these medications. And the problem with it is you get this polypharmacy vicious cycle where you start having one or two of these side effects, and then you're on other medications to treat those side effects. And that can spiral out of control pretty fast.
Oh, well said. Yeah, I mean, I've had people where they'll say they get on an antidepressant, but then that their mood starts to fluctuate. So then they get put on like a bipolar med on top of the antidepressant, or some type of antipsychotic, or they get anxiety. So then they get put on lorazepam or Xanax because then they can't sleep. And then, like you mentioned, three, 4, 5, 6 pharmaceuticals later, you've got a really, really toxic potion that you're having to put in the body, but you still don't feel well.
Exactly. So a couple of options here. Number one, if you're on an antidepressant and you get off, number one, don't ever pull yourself off. Okay. Don't ever go back to the prescribing physician, and you need to be tapered off. And it depends, right? Some people are on these medications because they felt a little bit off and they're on them, but they weren't on them for a major reason. And some people were put on them because they had some serious issues and they needed to get stability back in. So typically the more you were on them to really kind of stabilize your life because your symptoms were out of control, the longer that taper has to be off. So according to some psychiatrists, 1 to 2 years taper for some. I've seen some that they said, I'm going to just come off right away. And I'm like, don't do that. Go back to the prescribing doctor. But some said, nope. And they were fine, right? Because they made a lot of changes. So we always advocate the more conservative approach. Go back to that prescribing physician because they know your situation better, and tell them that where you're at and that you're making a lot of these diet and lifestyle changes and that you want to start to slowly taper off those medications. That's number one. Number two, if you're still having issues and side effects and you want to use some of these amino acids with us, typically what we'll do is we'll work on the amino acids first, because the amino acids will actually make the medication work better, right? Because if the amino acids are a part of the building blocks that are getting reorganized from the reuptake portals being inhibited, then you're going to have basically the meds will work better, right? Because remember, here's your presynaptic neuron, here's your postsynaptic neuron, all the neurotransmitters are here, but the number of them are going down because of the reuptake, because of the recycling of those amino acids is greater, right? The longer these amino acids live outside of the presynaptic neuron, the more they get more of them there, the number of them goes up. So the more they can affect neurotransmission across the synaptic cleft there. So the more the meds will work better, work like they should have worked when the neurotransmitter levels were higher. So you may start to have side effects of the antidepressant as those neurotransmitter levels go up. So be very mindful of that. If you start having side effects of the medication, there's two choices. You can decrease the neurotransmitter levels by decreasing the amino acids, or you can decrease the medication.
Yep.
Right. So typically what I always recommend is once you kind of have those side effects, you can go back to that physician that prescribed it and you can start to slowly taper that down. So I tend to get people stable first, and then I make moves by referring back to the prescribing physician. I don't ever want to move the medication around first because that creates an unstable environment, especially those meds. So we get stabilized, and then we refer back to the prescribing doctor for them to adjust and modify according to what they think is correct based on that patient's needs.
Well said, especially if they've been on it 10, 20 years. I mean, who knows?
Exactly. So it creates lots of other symptoms. So you got to be careful of that. So regarding a couple other components, diet plays a big component. So adequate protein, I'd say at least a palm's worth of protein per meal. And again, I'm 6'2", 210 pounds. My palm's bigger than, someone that's 5 feet, 100 pounds. So that tends to be a pretty good rule of thumb. And to be more exact, I would say half your body weight in grams. So 200 pounds, 100 grams of protein. If you're 120 pounds, 60 grams of protein is a pretty good rule of thumb regarding how much to do. If you exercise more and you're more active, then I'll go to a full hand versus a palm. And if you're like a vegan vegetarian and you're trying to maybe add in some protein, I would just start with a quarter to half a palm to start. And I'd make sure there's adequate enzymes in HCl, because more than likely, unless you're going to be a vegan vegetarian because of environmental reasons, then typically you're there because you feel better off meat. And if you feel better off meat, it's because your digestion's in the tank and you're not able to digest it and break it down. So you're getting a lot of putrefaction and rancidification of proteins. So it's just rotting in your stomach. So you're feeling the rot and saying, oh, animal protein's bad. No, it's you're not digesting it well. And then we could go all into the environmental implications of meat, because it really isn't what it is if you're eating organic and local. It's more the factory farm CAFO kind of feedlot models that really create the environmental issues.
Oh yeah, we're finding that pasture raised animals actually help with recirculation of nutrients back into the soil. I mean, the topsoil has been so degraded. We've lost a lot of minerals over the past 50 years and vitamins in the soil. And pasture raised animals, we've had this cycle where the hooves are putting the poop back into the dirt and kind of starts all over. And we've messed that up with raising cows on concrete, feeding them corn. So still, unfortunately, animals get lumped into the animal category, and that's it. There really needs to be more distinction for sure.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about, the excess of methane produced by these animals. That's because they're fed corn and grains. You cut out the corns and grains, the methane's a non-issue. Also, it's a closed loop if you feed them grass and what they're supposed to consume, because if you feed them corn and grains, you actually have to start hauling away the manure afterwards, because it becomes E. coli, rich. So you have to start hauling away all of the manure afterwards, versus if you have a closed system, meaning eat the grass, the poop goes on the ground, then the poop goes into the ground and actually creates fertilizer, but the hoofs and other things feed off of that. And then if you have a closed cycle, then the grubs come in from the manure, and then you bring the chickens out and the chickens eat the grubs, and it's this beautiful closed cycle. Jules Salatin talks about this in his farm, the Polyface farm. He's got a couple of books on this idea of permaculture and this kind of closed or open loop, or closed loop, right? Everything's it's a complete cycle of how everything works in the farming.
Wow, I didn't realize that about the poop of corn-fed animals. They have to haul it out. That makes total sense.
Yeah, if you watch the movie Food Inc., they detail it pretty well in that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Joel Salatin's got a good book called Folks, This Ain't Normal. I would encourage people to read that. And then for amino acid books, you could check out Julia Ross, The Mood Cure, The Diet Cure. I've interviewed her a couple times on the podcast. She's got some really cool experience there. So check out those resources. And then if you want to schedule with Justin or myself, visit our websites, justinhealth.com. You can schedule. And also, I think you've done some YouTube videos on it, and I've done some YouTube videos on aminos too. So if you're wanting like a more short, condensed version of this, if it went over your head a bit or you just got a bit daydreamy on us, then go to the YouTube, look up Justin Health or look up Evan Brand. We've got videos that are probably less than 10 minutes that will detail kind of the symptoms, and then we'll do a part 2, part 3 on this too.
Absolutely. And again, the big take home is, we'll have a part 2, like you said, but the big take home is diet is dialed in. Figure out the macronutrients that you need. Don't skip meals, especially if you have health issues, because blood sugar fluctuations can create adrenaline stresses that cause you to burn through that adrenaline more. Also, the more sugar fluctuation you have, the more you're going to burn through B vitamins, because part of B vitamins is basically generating fuel from glucose. So if you're causing your blood sugar system to fluctuate, the more you're going to burn through B vitamins, especially B6, which is really, really, really important for carrying the signal from one nerve to the other. B6 is really important. It's also important for the synthesis of these neurochemicals. Make sure you're digesting the protein you're eating. If you're getting gassy or bloaty or constipated or diarrhea after the meals, there may be some digestive issues from an infection standpoint, or food allergen standpoint, or a enzyme HCl standpoint. And so B vitamins, and also having a really good multivitamin just there in the background is important, because the vitamin C and extra minerals like magnesium and B12 and just other things that are there. It's important to have, I'd say, just a good B complex there, and or a good multi in the background when doing all this, just to make sure the other nutrients are there as well.
Well said.
Well, any other comments, Evan, you want to put out there that we didn't quite emphasize?
No, I think if I have more, I'll put them on next episode.
Yeah, just disclaimer, if you're on these medications and you're like really excited and you want to make some changes, number one, work with a practitioner. Number two, don't ever go off your medications cold turkey. Number three, get stabilized before you make changes, and go back to the prescribing physician. Tell them what you're doing, what your goals are, and that ask them to create a taper plan specific to where they're at. I've seen some doctors that are just like, come off. And I'm like, hey, if you're going to do that with your medical license, okay, that's fine. Some will say, hey, we need a 1-year taper. Again, they know the patient better. They know what their rationale for prescribing the medications was. So always go back to that prescribing physician. Tell them kind of where you're at, so then they can kind of create a plan for you.
Perfect. Well said. Nice job, man.
Oh, and then also real quick too, you outlined it earlier about like this issue with kids on antidepressants. We got a major epidemic with kids on these drugs. And a lot of it just comes down to their diet just being crap, food dyes, chemicals, sugar. So if you have kids with these issues too, again, we're starting at the same place, the diet. And again, I know it's hard for parents, because parents project what they want, what their needs are, onto the child. They see their kid and they're like, oh, I have fond memories eating this junk food when I was a kid. Therefore, I want my kid to have that same experience, so to speak. And again, the Pottenger Cats example, right? Each generation gets a little more nutrient deficient as the food quality goes down. So the type of food that we had access to 20 or 30 years ago isn't even the same quality of food we have access to today. So remember, your kids may have a weaker constitution, and also maybe even gluten sensitive too. So you got to keep that in mind. When your kids have health issues, you really want to dial up the food quality as much as possible. And the first place you start is set the example and have at least 1 to 2 family meals together is ideal.
Yeah, well said. I got to run.
Evan, great chatting with you, my man. You have an awesome day. All right, brother. Take care. Bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.